Okay guys, so let's try the second example of dividing a polynomial by a monomial. Again, I want you to notice that the top above the fraction line is a polynomial, but the bottom is just one term. That's a monomial. So we're dividing by a monomial. So in other words, if the bottom is a monomial, then you do it one way. And what do? You take the monomial on the bottom and you put it underneath each term on top. In this case, we have three terms on top again, like the last problem, so we're going to end up having three fractions. But you don't always end up having three fractions. You could have two fractions or seven fractions. It depends on how many terms are on top. So if there were 9 terms on top, then you'd put this underneath each of the 9 terms. You'd end up having 9 fractions. If there were only 2 terms on top, then you end up having 2 fractions. But the thing you need to remember is put this monomial underneath each of those terms. So we're going to end up having 3 fractions. Here's the first fraction line. We're going to put this monomial over this monomial. So we have 36, a to the 15, b to the power 2. Bottom is negative 12, a to the 9, b to the 4. Okay, the only real difference in this problem is that the monomial on the bottom has a negative sign. So that just makes the problem a little bit different. I'll show you how to deal with that later, but for now all I want you to do is I want you to put the whole term, including the minus sign, on the bottom of each term. Now what sign goes here? Again, the way I'm teaching it to you, you're going to put this plus sign right here. Okay, so put that plus sign there. And then next term, you're going to write this monomial over that whole thing. So you have 21, a to the 8, b to the 7. And on the bottom again, put this negative 12, a to the 9, b to the 4th. What symbol goes here? Whatever symbol's there. Since that's a minus, you put a minus. Then one more fraction. You're going to put 11, a to the 9, b. And then you put this negative 12, a to the 9, b to the 4. So on the bottom, you put negative 12, a to the 9, b to the 4, underneath each term. Up on top, you're going to write down this on top of the first fraction, this on top of the second one, this on top of the third one. And those symbols in between there, you're going to put them on the side. So like, don't put this negative sign up here. I'm having you put it over here on the side. Same thing here. This plus sign, I'm having you put it over here on the side. Okay, once you get that step, now you're just going to divide the way we divide monomials. Each of these terms is dividing monomials. So when you divide monomials, how do you do it? You do it separately. But there's one extra little thing. Before you even divide separately, I want you to figure out what the sign of each answer is. In other words, so each term, one by one, is it going to be a positive term or a negative term? And the way you figure that out is you count the negative signs. If there's an odd number of negative signs, the answer is negative. If there's an even number of negative signs, the answer is positive. Just like when you multiply and divide negatives and positives, again, you always count the minus signs. Even number of negative signs is a positive answer. Odd number of negative signs is a negative answer. If you look over here, I see one negative sign. That's odd. That means the answer is negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the negative sign out in the front of the fraction. Okay? Once I've done that, I'm not even going to look at this negative sign anymore because I've taken care of the sign of the answer. And now I'm going to divide separately. So now I'm going to divide the numbers. Notice I'm going to ignore the negative sign because I've already taken care of it. It's here. Then we'll divide the a's. And we'll divide the b's. You divide separately. Okay, when you divide the 36 and 12, again, I want you to treat it like a fraction. But you know what? 12 goes into 36. So 36 divided by 12, that's just 3. So I'm just going to write the answer 3. You write that answer on top, so the 3 goes here. If you don't like that, what you could do is you could divide the top and bottom by 12. You do 36 divided by 12, you get 3. You do 12 divided by 12, you get 1. You could put a 1 on the bottom. But when you have a 1 on the bottom, it's not necessary to write it. So you can not write it, and I'm just not going to write it now. Okay, then you divide the a's. When you divide the a's, again, what do you need to remember? You have to write your answer on top. And then you have to subtract the powers. And which order do you subtract the powers in? You have to do the top power minus the bottom power. So this is going to be a. Since they both have base a, the base of the answer is going to be a. And then you do top power 15 minus bottom power 9. Okay, then when you divide the b's, same thing. They have the same base, so the answer is going to have the same base. So you're going to put b up on top here. And you subtract the powers, top power minus bottom power. So you do 2 minus 4. There's nothing on the bottom there. Don't worry about it. You can leave it blank for now. There'll be something down there later. If it bothers you, there's absolutely nothing down there. You can put a 1 if you want, but it's not necessary. Let's go to the next term. Again, because there's this negative sign down here, what I want you to do first is I want you to figure out what the sign of the answer is. So there's only one negative sign. That's an odd number of negative signs. It means the answer is negative. So the answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to put a minus sign here. I know how you see a plus here. But now what I'm saying is what's the sign of the overall answer and put that here. So the overall thing is negative, so I'm putting a negative here. Okay, now Other than that, you're going to divide separately. So you're going to take the numbers in the front and divide them. Again, notice I'm going to ignore the negative sign, just the 21 divided by 12. Then you're going to divide the A's, and then you'll divide the B's. Okay, when you divide the 21 and the 12, again, you're looking for something that goes into both. Let me see here. It looks like 3 goes into both. I think that's the biggest thing that goes into both. So we're going to divide the top of this by 3 and the bottom by 3. If you divide the 21 by 3, you get 7. Divide the 12 by 3, you get 4. Okay, then when you divide the A's, again, the answer will have base A, and you'll write it on top. And you subtract the powers, top power minus bottom power, 8 minus 9. Okay, then when you divide the B's, same thing. The answer will have base B, you'll write it on top. And it'll be 7 minus 4, top power minus bottom power. Okay, let's go to the next term. Now I want to count the minus signs, including this one. So over here I see one negative sign, and then over here I see another negative sign. That's 2 negative signs. So the overall answer will be positive. So you're going to write a plus symbol here. So look, at the beginning of the problem, I had you write these symbols, the plus and the minus over there. But then what I'm saying is when there's a negative on the bottom, figure out what this overall sign of the answer is, and it might change those symbols. Here, since I see, including this whole fraction plus this sign here, there's 2 negative signs. That's an even number of negative signs to make the answer positive. Over here, this symbol and count all the negative signs. You only get 1 negative sign. That's odd, so you get 1 negative sign there. Okay, so figure out the sign of the answer first. Put that here. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to ignore this negative, I'm going to ignore this negative, and I'm just going to divide the monomials separately, term by term separately. So we divide the numbers in the front, then we'll divide the A terms, then you divide the B terms. Now we divide the 11 and the 12, nothing goes into both evenly, so I'm just going to write down 11 over 12. Okay, then we divide the A's again, write your answer on top, so you're going to write an A on top, and you're going to subtract the powers, 9 minus 9. Okay, then we divide the B's, same thing, write your answer on top, so B goes on top, and you subtract the powers. What's the power on the B here when you don't see a power? When you don't see a power, there's a 1 there, so when you subtract the powers, don't forget the 1. And make sure you do top minus bottom, so you do 1 minus 4, so 1 minus 4 here. Okay, now, next line. Now I'm going to go ahead and actually subtract these powers and see what we get. Okay, so we have 3. We subtract 15 minus 9, that's 6. And then B, the 2 minus 4, it's negative 2. Okay. Over here, subtract the powers. That 8 minus 9 is negative 1, so we have 8 to the negative 1. And then 7 minus 4 is 3, B to the third. Okay. And then over here, 9 minus 9 is 0, so 8 to the 0. And then 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Okay, so we get that. All right, now what's left to do? The only thing left to do is to make sure that you don't have any negative powers in your answer. If you have any negative powers in your answer, you're going to move them. Also, if you have a 0 power, just make that term disappear. Like over here, a to the 0. Remember, anything to the 0 is 1. But because it's 1 times other stuff, you just get the other stuff. So you could just think of this term as going away. A to the power 0 just goes away. I'm not going to write it. And if you ever have a power positive 1, don't write the positive 1. You don't need to write it. So let's go see what powers are going to move. So here's a term with the negative power. That's going to move to the bottom. When you have a term with the negative power and you move it, it becomes positive. So that power, when you move it to the bottom, the power will be positive. Same thing here, negative power, we're going to move it. Any other negative powers over here? Okay, this one, we're going to move that one to the bottom. Okay, so let's see. So we have negative. Let's see what stays on top. The 3 and the 8 and the 6 stay on top. You're going to move that to the bottom. When you move that to the bottom, the negative 2 power is going to turn into a positive 2 power. It's going to be the positive 2 here. Okay, then minus over here, let's see. The 7 stays on top, the b to the third stays on top, the 4 stays on the bottom. This term moves to the bottom because it has a negative power. So that's a to the negative 1. When you move it to the bottom, it's going to be a to the positive 1. Now, because it has a positive 1 power, you don't need to write a positive 1 power, so I'm just going to write a. That's a to the 1 right there, just I'm not putting the power 1. Okay, let's go to this next term. 11 so the 11's on top. The a to the 0 goes away, so there's nothing else on top. On the bottom, we have a 12. And then when you move this to the bottom, again, negative power, when you move it to the bottom, it's going to have a positive power. So it's going to be b to the positive 3 now. Okay, so that's the answer to that one. Okay, so let me just summarize this dividing a polynomial by a monomial business. So when you're dividing by a monomial, so a polynomial on top, monomial on the bottom, or dividing by a monomial. So when you're dividing by a monomial, what do? You put the monomial that's on the bottom underneath each term separately. When you do that, you get a bunch of fractions, in this case 3, in the last example 3, but in general it could be any number of fractions. So you get a bunch of different fractions where each one you're dividing monomials. How do you divide monomials? You divide separately. divide the numbers in the front, means simplify it as a fraction. Then we divide the letters, you subtract the powers, make sure you do top power minus bottom power, write your answer on top. And then the last thing is make sure if you have negative powers, you move the terms. So move the terms to the bottom if they're on top, and you have a negative power, move it to the bottom. And one more thing, if you have a negative power, if you have a negative on the bottom over here, then after the first step, when you're going to divide separately, before you divide separately, check to see what the sign of the answer is and put that out in the front. So if overall the term is negative, put the negative in the front and then don't look at the negative sign anymore. Same thing over here. Overall, this was a negative term because there was one negative sign, put a negative in the front and don't even look at the negative sign anymore. Over here, there were two negative signs total, one there, so two negative signs makes it positive, so you put a plus there, and then you don't even look at the signs anymore. Okay guys, I hope that clarified dividing a polynomial by monomial. Now go check out the next two examples so you can see or get a little more clear on dividing a polynomial by another polynomial.